And we continue at 107 in the afternoon. Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Broadcasting live from the Morongo Casino Resort and Spa Living Room Studios. Mr. Randy Wangs at the sports desk in Culver City.
John, amid a relentless spike in crime in Alameda County, Pamela Price is going to face her constituents in a public safety meeting where she's going to tell them that they need to check their privilege.
Quite frankly.
How do you think that's going to work out for her?
Oh, here's how great this is going to be. She put out a mail blast to all her supporters saying, please attend this meeting because it's going to be full of hostile people that don't like me and want me to get recalled.
Oh, it's going to look like a Pentecostal service.
If there's any sound from that meeting, we will definitely have it tomorrow because Pamela Price is George Gascon 2.0.
Quite frankly.
George Gascon in a dress, as they say.
Quite frankly.
You know what, by the way, that is in reference to? She was doing an interview because she was being recalled with KPIX's Betty Yu. And at the end of the interview, and by the way, in the interview, they kept in on KPIX that her handler was trying to feed them questions about how successful she was, and they weren't buying it. In fact, they left it on the tape. But at the end of the interview, Betty Yu says, well, I'm so glad we could finally do this interview. Do you think we could talk to you in the future? And she says, no.
Quite frankly.
What's that laugh, too? It's like a Disney villain.
Who voted for this person?
800-222-KABC is your telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. Well, one of the institutions, and I know this may be hard to wrap your head around today, but if you go back into time, what I'm telling you is true. I promise you that. One of the institutions that kept L.A. from going off a cliff any number of times was the L.A. Times. When the L.A. Times was owned by the Chandler family, they were a good steward of the community. They had their eye on local government. They had a huge staff of people. They reported on corruption, and they reported on people who were political radicals who wanted to do bad things in the state. I would say at the peak of their power, doing good things for California, happened during a gubernatorial election around the time of the New Deal. And there was a candidate, you probably read his book, The Jungle, Upton Sinclair is his name. He was a socialist. He was an avowed socialist. And he used to run for office as a socialist candidate and would never win because third-party candidates never do. Well, he convinced the Democrats at one point to nominate him for governor in California. He was running against a guy formerly of Long Beach, Frank Merriam, who was the lieutenant governor who became governor when a vacancy was created. And Upton Sinclair ran on the platform called EPIC, End Poverty in California. And he was a socialist, not in the Bernie Sanders mold, not in the AOC mold, not in the Tom Hayden mold, but in the mold of a traditional socialist. He believed that the government should own the means of production, meaning, had he been elected, the government would have taken over the farms. The government would have taken over the movie studios. The government would have taken over the factories. They would have taken over private property. That's what he wanted to do. And the polls showed him leading the incumbent Republican governor. And it was three institutions that stepped in to save the day for the people of California. William Randolph Hearst, who owned the Hearst newspapers. You had Hollywood, oddly enough, who stepped in and did what they had to do to get the message out. MGM in particular. And then you had the LA Times, the Chandler family. And the LA Times turned their newspaper into an organism that let everyone know how radical Upton Sinclair was and what he would do to the state. Without the LA Times, he probably would have won the election, and he probably would have single-handedly destroyed the farms in the Central Valley, destroyed all of our production, and destroyed the film industry. One man could have done all of that. But the LA Times helped save the day. Unfortunately, with the economics of the newspapers as it is, the families that used to run these newspapers are largely speaking no longer there. It was the Chandlers that owned the LA Times. It was a guy by the name of Manchester Bodie that owned the Daily News. You had people like the Bancroft family that owned the Wall Street Journal. They're all gone. And now, essentially, what these newspapers have become is they've become toys for billionaires. Billionaires who want to buy a newspaper so they can become local celebrities and they can get invited to everything. And they can be looked at as men and women about town. That's what the Soon-Shiong family did when they bought this newspaper. When they bought the newspaper, he gets invited to everything. His daughter gets put on the Public Safety Commission in West Hollywood because Lindsay Horvath wants the endorsement of the newspaper. And she was the one that led the defund the police movement and defunded the police in West Hollywood. And the LA Times, of course, backed her up and backed up all of the radicals that she supports politically.
Quite frankly,
instead of being an institution that pushes back on the insanity, the LA Times is hitting the gas pedal. However, there is a rumor that's been circulating saying that the owner of the LA Times, Patrick Soon-Shiong, may be looking to sell the paper, and the LA Times may come under new ownership. He also owned the San Diego Union Tribune, and the Union Tribune was recently sold to the company that owns my newspaper, the newspaper where my column appears. And that, of course, is the Southern California News Group. Joining us to talk about this is a gentleman who's been reporting on it, certainly been all over social media talking about it, and probably knows more about it than certainly me or Randy. Daniel Guss from the Guss Report. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Hey, John and Randy, thank you so much for having me on. That was an amazing introduction with history. That was superb. That was amazing. And you could be sure that they would have nominated him today to be mayor of Los Angeles, because that is what the LA Times is about. That was a great history lesson you just provided.
Well, thank you so much. So let's move into the present now. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think the LA Times is actually for sale, or do you think this is just rumor?
I believe it's for sale in some degree or another, whether it's they're having, you know how these media flacks, Hillary Manning at the Times, among others, the way they use words, well, it's not for sale, but there are talks. It's not talks, but they had dinner. I believe it's for sale. My personal belief is that the Times has been actively for sale, but that the offer was probably so shockingly low that Soon-Shiong is basically backed into a corner. Can I prove it? No. But from the little things that I'm piecing together, I don't see how he would want to stay in this business that's dying, that's eroding, that's rotting. They can't get people to read it, yet he's losing money, as far as I can tell, after paying way too much for it. So from everything that I can see, and that Joe Bell Bruno on Substack, when he broke the story, everything that I can see says that it's not only for sale, but that it may be a fire sale.
I talked to someone who just spoke with him not that long ago. And what I was told, the subject didn't come up if the newspaper was officially for sale or not for sale. But he does believe he way overpaid for the newspaper, and he doesn't like that. He was complaining about the newspaper hemorrhaging money, and he was particularly complaining about all of the pension debt the newspaper has. The pension debt that the LA Times has is like the pension debt for the state of California. It's absolutely crippling, and there's no way around it.
Right. And what this also tells us, or what it suggests, is that Dr. Soon-Shiong didn't do his homework, which is difficult to believe for somebody of his accomplishment and wealth. He's the richest guy in Los Angeles, rumored to be worth about $8 billion. If he had looked at the transactions of other major newspapers, he would have seen that in the 90s, the New York Times bought the Boston Globe, which is one of the most respected newspapers in the United States, for about $1 billion in the 90s. And when they had sold it a decade and a half later, they lost about 90 to 95% of what he had paid for it. So if he's paying $500 million in 2018, he didn't learn his lessons from the New York Times buying the Boston Globe, or for that matter, the New York Daily News, or any of these other major papers, which is unusual because he's not new to the news business. So what you're hearing seems to align with what I've been hearing.
And things aren't all roses over at the LA Times internally either. They're having some labor disputes over there.
Oh, heck yeah. And by the way, Joe Bell Bruno reported about a week and a half, a little earlier on July 20th that the San Diego Union Tribune editor exited after Alden bought out the San Diego Union Tribune. A few weeks ago, the LA Times laid off, I think, 74 newsroom people, which is about 13% of the staff. And on top of it, it's not happy because apparently the LA Times writers' biases, they're all pissed off that Soon Shang's daughter's biases are interfering with theirs. So it's not a happy place in El Segundo right now. And by the way, I hate to go back to the Dianne Feinstein thing, but they endorsed Dianne Feinstein in 2018 for the term that she's serving now, citing things that she did in 1994. So this isn't just a bad business deal. I feel it's a lot of comeuppance, a lot of bad advice, a lot of bad policies, and not focusing on the things that would have helped middle-class Californians have a better circumstance than they have right now.
Well, and now the LA Times is so hard left on everything. It doesn't matter what section you're reading. It doesn't matter if it's the front page, the editorial page, the business section, whatever. They seem to have the fingerprints of their political bias on every piece in that newspaper. And one of the things that they just did that I think is going to be proven to be a huge mistake is they're gutting the sports section. There are a lot of people in California who are essentially non-political. Most people in California, or at least a significant chunk of us, aren't from here. And so they like to read the sports section. They don't follow the local politics the way that you and I do. And they want to know about what the baseball teams are doing and the football teams and the hockey teams and those sorts of things. When you get rid of essentially everything that makes your sports page unique, you're just left with the political bias, and that doesn't appeal to everyone.
Right. And to further to your point is that that's what sports is about. Sports is supposed to take your mind off of the rotten day or the traffic on the 101 or the intensive heat, which I happen to like. Sports is a distraction. So that's the one thing that generation after generation, year after year, the LA Times got it great. They had so many great things in their sports section, and now they're gutting that as well. It might as well become USA Today with a far, far, far left bent on everything else. You're absolutely right.
We're speaking with Daniel Guss, who's the editor of the Guss Report. You can follow him on Twitter at the Guss Report, 2 S's in Gus, and you can get him online at danielguss.substack.com. Now, if the LA Times does in fact decide to sell, who would you like to see buy the newspaper?
John Phillips and Randy Wang, for starters, because he would actually tell the truth. And you know what? The truth actually sells. People want to know what's going on at City Hall, at the county supervisors in Sacramento. It would appear that the Penske Group, at least there's an entity that is in publishing, despite some recent missteps with the Saudis and all of that stuff, but somebody local, somebody who will actually restore real local journalism. That's why I'm writing about City Hall, is because they're not telling you the truth about what's going on there. And somehow I'm getting the tips and the leads on what's going on at City Hall and Curran Price and Herb Wesson and all of that stuff. They should be getting all of that stuff. So there's a tremendous gap. And so we need local ownership, which Patrick Soon-Shiong is, but who are going to get rid of all of the biases, all of the issues, all of the agendas, and stop with the pronouns. Everybody can be whatever pronoun you want, but when they're writing about a single person and referring to them as they or their, it's like their focus is on pronouns and not the corruption. Where Jose Weezer and Ridley Thomas and Mitch Englander and Curran Price and so on and so forth, where are they breaking those stories before? Why are they not digging into these deals? So it has to be local. It has to be swept clear of all of the biases and the agendas.
I'm also of the belief that the LA Times is not so much a community newspaper, but an occupying force these days, and a newspaper that wishes that they were being published in a different city. Hollywood is the main industry that people pay attention to in Southern California. Yet they weren't the ones that broke the Harvey Weinstein scandal. That was Ronan Farrow in The New Yorker. Could have been an NBC, but they decided to spike the story. They don't have gossip columnists like many newspapers in New York and the tabloids in London and Australia and other places do. If you're interested in that industry, gossip sells. Gossip is something that people are interested in. They do a very poor job covering the industry that makes this town run.
Right. Absolutely. It is on, your private parts, who you want to sleep with, what Democratic Party affiliation you have, and Trump sucks. And that's what you get from the LA Times. It almost makes it so predictable that you don't need to read the LA Times because you know what their opinion is going to be before you open the first page. This morning, I made a prediction. July 27th, 2023. I am telling you here and now, they are going to endorse Karen Bass for mayor of Los Angeles in a year or two, regardless of what the conditions are on the ground in Los Angeles, and they're probably going to be worse than they are already. And so what's the point in reading the LA Times if you know where they're going with it anyway? What we need, as you said, is like a page 6 to tell you exactly what's going on, people who are like watching where the power players are going at night and telling us the next morning, not telling us the next morning, telling us on social media. And so it lacks all of the above. And so the point is, if you know what the LA Times is going to say anyway, what's the point in clicking on it? What's the point in opening the newspaper? And what's the point in subscribing? I don't get it. I don't get it. And by the way, I think they are, as your source said, I think they're hemorrhaging money. That's why they don't release the real statistics of the circulation in print or digital.
Two more points on them. Not only do they miss all of the big entertainment stories, not only do they gut their sports section, but the LA Times also misses the big political stories that happen in their own state. Look at the big national political story right now. It's Hunter Biden. We've now figured out who's buying his art, or some of them who have purchased his art. It's all mega Democratic donors from Los Angeles. How did the LA Times miss that? And by the way, there's more coming, so stay tuned on that. And I can promise you that the LA Times will miss what's coming around the corner, too. But they didn't find the French Laundry tape. That was Fox 11 and Bill Malosian. Right. They didn't catch Sheila Kuehl, who was dining out at an Italian restaurant near her house when she said that the restaurant should be closed for COVID-19. They missed that one, too. They miss everything in front of their face. How about Kamala Harris? How about Javier Becerra? How about Eric Garcetti? These people are all falling on their face nationally, and the Democrats in D.C. were all taken by surprise because the L.A. Times never covered their incompetence.
Yeah, and may I point out that when the Speaker of the House the other day, Kevin McCarthy, said he's going to open an impeachment inquiry, it was in Section A, page 8, in the thin, I think it's 1.5 or 2-inch column on the right. So the Speaker of the House is talking about opening a presidential impeachment inquiry, and it's on page A8. How can that be? And it's not by accident. These are not dumb people. They know exactly what they're doing, and they know exactly what they want us to think. The problem is what they want us to think is not what's really out there. You look at the Hunter Biden thing, my God, why is that not there? That's front and center. The Comer is going to connect that thing to Biden, be sure of it. And by the way, then what? Is the LA Times going to endorse Kamala Harris for president? Because they want to, but they keep missing the big picture. It's time and time again, and it's so predictable.
Daniel Guss, editor of the Guss Report. You can get him online at danielguss.substack.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at the Guss Report, 2 S's in Gus. Daniel, thanks so much for stopping by.
Anytime you want me, I'll be here, John.
If you want to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you want to go back and re-listen to our interview with Daniel Guss and figure out everything the LA Times is doing wrong, that is easy to do.
That's right. Go to KABC.com, click on podcasts, or you can go to the Apple Podcasts app, iHeart, Spotify, YouTube, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe, download all the episodes. That's right. Unbeknownst to us, apparently it's also on YouTube. So, add it to your playlist. Watch it on the TV or on your phone or whatever. But please subscribe to the show. Give us all the clicks so we can brag about it.
All right. It is time to open up the KABC Crime Blotter.
If the cashier is dummy.
Questions?
And surprise, surprise, today's edition takes us to Oakland.
Carjackings are getting so commonplace in Oakland that multiple times this week there have been news stories on them, including the craziest one yesterday where a woman who luckily had a dash cam had footage of what it was like when she was nearly carjacked when two people in hoods stopped her car by pulling over sideways, blocking the road, trying to approach her with a gun. This woman hit the gas as hard as she could and escaped, and it is a wild scene.
Let's have more details on this crazy tale.
Here's KPIX.
It's happening across the Bay Area as well. We have shocking new video of a driver's split-second reaction that helped her escape an armed carjacking in the Oakland Hills. This is the second one we've reported on this week in the same area.
They're going to need a special carjacking reporter.
It's almost as if they have a DA who has no clue what she's doing.
And it follows a disturbing pattern. The woman was driving alone near Skyline Boulevard and Keller Avenue. So there's her dash cam video rolling on the car driving in front of her. Now, John Ramus shows us what happened next.
This dash cam video posted in Nextdoor is provoking a lot of talk and a lot of fear. In it, a woman is driving on Skyline Boulevard when the car in front suddenly pulls up, blocking the lane.
No.
And that's when she hits the gas.
Now, that would be a great drop. However, given the fact that this woman almost got murdered, I don't know if it would be tasteful to use.
No, we will not be using that, but you need to hear it at least once to illustrate what the hell was going on, because that is a scary-ass situation, and most people would freeze. They would go Mitch McConnell on that. They wouldn't know what to do. Is that a safe reference to use now?
I think so.
The driver was lucky, managing to escape, but is too traumatized to speak about it now. Elizabeth Gage knows how she feels.
Unbelievable.
So wait, they couldn't get the woman from the video to do an on-camera interview, so now they find somebody else who used to be in a carjacking, and they play the video for her.
Yeah, and then you put the scream on a loop.
Yes, that is how this works.
Elizabeth Gage knows how she feels.
Unbelievable. God, that's scream.
When a newsroom knows they've got good sound, they've got to use it as much as possible.
Well, this is what happened with those women from Reseda. They kept replaying it over and over and over again during the report until we figured out we'd hit gold.
I know.
I love them.
That scream. That scream is just, oh my God.
Gage had her own harrowing experience recently when a car began following her near her home. For 35 minutes, she tried to elude them, reaching speeds over 100 miles per hour on the freeway.
Yeesh!
How could you go 100 miles an hour on any freeway in California?
That's the part I never understand. Every time there's a high-speed chase, especially ones in the middle of the day or during drive time, how is there no traffic stopping all of this?
Especially in Oakland.
And I thought, wow, this guy is going to, whoever these people are, they're going to get you. And I kept yelling, you're not going to get me. No way, no way.
So this
Wait, so she was taunting them?
I don't know if that's advisable.
So this latest video is simply confirmation of what a lot of people have seen lately. A car slowly casing parked vehicles at 4 o'clock in the morning. Car burglars making a fast getaway. A package thief staring up at a surveillance camera. These are the images that people living in the hills thought they were immune to.
I'm afraid to go out and get my mail. I'm afraid to walk my dog. Yeah, no, this is new.
I wonder what changed.
And by the way, it's Oakland. This is not new.
Well, this is technically the nice part of Oakland.
Okay. I remember when Jerry Brown was the mayor of Oakland, and he went on some trip to Asia, and he came back. Now, granted, he did not live in the hills. He lived down by Jack London Square. And he was pulling up to his house, and his car, which was parked outside, he found on 4 cinder blocks.
Yikes.
But as neighbors start to avoid driving on Skyline Boulevard, City Council member Kevin Jenkins has seen enough. He says he will be asking for automated license plate readers on the street and wants to see consequences for violent offenders.
That's not going to happen.
No, not with your DA up there.
I want to ensure that people that are committing harm in our neighborhoods are punished. All right? And so what that looks like on the other side with the district attorney's office, I'm sure they will take their best thinking into that. But I'm here to advocate.
Read the paper.
Quite frankly.
But I'm here to advocate that if you're creating harm in Oakland, in our community, that you're punished.
How hard is it to say you should be in prison?
No, they don't want to say that because they regard that as racist. But if you don't want to get carjacked, you have to put the carjackers in prison.
District Attorney Pamela Price is getting a lot of the blame for charging decisions that many feel sends a message of permissiveness to young people. Gage voted for Price, but says she had no idea what was in store.
She calls them our babies. These are not babies.
If you're the idiot that put this woman in office, then you know what? Getting carjacked is on you. Maybe you have to get carjacked enough times to where you finally get some sense.
When you're voting for an office like district attorney, shouldn't you just do the lightest amount of research on their stance on crime?
No, this woman had all the available information that she needed to know that Pamela Price was a nut, and she voted for her out of ideological obligation. But if that's what you're going to do when you go into the ballot box and you vote, then you have to live with the consequences. So enjoy getting carjacked, lady.
Gage voted for Price, but says she had no idea what was in store.
She calls them our babies. These are not babies. These are really disturbed young people. And there needs to be a consequence, because without a consequence, everybody else is looking and saying, nothing happens.
She better sign that damn recall.
No kidding.
A public safety meeting will be held Thursday night in the Oakland Hills, and Price is currently scheduled to attend. But Gage says she probably won't be getting a warm welcome with this image so fresh in people's minds.
They had to use it a third time.
Well, if I was doing that report, I would have used it about 8 times.
I know.
There you have it. You vote for Gascon, that's what you get. You vote for Pamela Price, that's what you get. You don't want criminals emboldened, then elect a DA that'll put them in prison. If you want to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
SAT students, get ready. It's time for another analogy from listener Steve. The staff of the LA Times going up against Nika is like Applebee's going up against Katie Porter.
Did he spell her name correctly?
He did not.
At some point, we're going to have a spelling bee on this show.
It is Porter. Maybe the AM makes it difficult for people to hear it clearly. Download it on the podcast. We're saying her name correctly. I don't know how people keep getting it wrong.
And Randy, tomorrow, Friday, the 2 o'clock hour, we have a special treat for the audience.
That's right. In the 2 o'clock hour, in person, in studio, we will welcome the legendary KABC host for over 44 years, the Motorman. He's going to hang out.
All right. So if you want to send well wishes to the Motorman, you have a question about your automobile or your plane, go ahead and give us a call because he'll be in with us the entire 2 o'clock hour tomorrow. Don't know if you saw this, Randy, but Todd Chrisley's children, Savannah and Chase, have made the news today.
I could count at least 15 different times in the last 4 years where you gave me didn't know about this, and it's about the Chrisleys. You are the number one source for Todd Chrisley news.
I can't get enough. And according to Chase and Savannah, their parents, who are both serving time in prison, one in Florida for 12 years and one in Kentucky for 7 years, are in facilities that don't offer air conditioning, even though we have a heat wave that's hitting both of those states. They also say that the Bureau of Prisons is sending their head person to do inspections at these various facilities, but that they're tipped off as to when they're going to be showing up. And instead of fixing the problems, what they do is they just paper over it so it looks fine when management's there, and then it goes back to normal the minute that management leaves. They also claim that in the dormitory area where Julie Chrisley is sleeping, that snakes somehow get into the building and slither around the floor. All of this, of course, a far cry from the mansion they left behind in Nashville.
How is this not being filmed for a potential next season once they get out?
Oh, if they had cameras inside those prisons, let me tell you, this may even beat Monday Night Raw on the USA Network.
Well, and, Chrisley Knows Best was aired on USA, so it's part of the NBC Universal family, which is also MSNBC, which is also Lockup. How are they not doing vertical integration here?
The reason is apparently you can bring in cameras to state prisons, but not federal prisons. And since they were convicted in federal court, they can't continue to do reality TV.
Oh, man. What could have been?
And now all of us lose. Why are we being punished too? All right, we've got one more hour coming up on the John Phillips Show. Congressman Mark Foley joins us next. Don't you go anywhere. 790 KABC.
Get out of my way. No. Ay, no.